try to get this link sent out. Alright, I think I got that part. Let's see. Just to make sure. Alright, looks okay. Alright, sending it out to my students now. I need to mark this video to skip ahead for people who aren't in my class. Okay. Alright. Hello and good afternoon. This is Introduction to Maya lab for my my university class, second semester. It's called Advanced, but I would consider it upper basic or intermediate as far as the material goes. In this lab we're going to look at the different channels that you can use for materials, as far as different ways you can throw a texture in there. Usually people, when they think of texture, they just associate it with the color information of a material, but for beginners, yes, that is true, but other ways we can use textures are specular maps, bump maps, etc., etc., and so on. So let's take a look at what exactly am I talking about here. Alright, well, first of all, let's look at this texture. And you'll see that this is the texture we're going to use for these walls on this little scene we're going to put together. And this contains all of the color information, and it will show up, very well on the in the scene. Let's go ahead and take a look at what it's going to look like with a bump map. And you can see here, well, it looks a lot different. And what this actually is, what a normal map or a bump map, depending on the program you're using, what it is height information. Now, it doesn't actually change the geometry, it just looks like it. Okay, so if you want to add a little bit of a visual appeal to your model, and you want to kind of make it look like it has more depth or more texture, like to the touch texture, than it actually has, you would use a normal map. Now, another way that you can add a little bit more visual appeal is a specular map. A specular map essentially are the highs and the lows, or the highlights, as far as the way light hits the object. Okay, so you can add a bit of shine, shall we say, to an object. Okay, so if you're unfamiliar with creating normal maps, the best tool to use is an image editing software, Photoshop or GIMP, or whatever your favorite is. Personally, I use Photoshop a lot for it. You just got to go in, change some channel data around. It's not that big of a deal. maybe a little bit of a healing brush here and there, maybe some burn, maybe a little bit of dodge, it just depends. Some sharpen, obviously. But there are several tools that you can get to create these. Well, you can just take any texture that you have, the color information, and it will produce, or they will produce, normal or specular maps for you automatically. A little bit of tweaking here and there, and you have something that's workable. The best thing that I've found is that you can actually use these programs to speed the process along before you actually import it into Photoshop or whatever image editing software that you prefer. One of the, well, I won't say best, but it's pretty good, is a program called Crazy Bump, and you can go ahead and look it up. It's free, so automatically I like it to help us people out who don't have crazy huge studios and crazy big budgets. So let's go ahead and take a look, and keep in mind what this normal map looks like right here. Okay? Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and hide these for a moment. Well, actually, I won't need them again. And then the Crazy Bump software, let's go ahead and use this open, and we're going to create, actually let me turn on my mouse pose. I don't know if it's going to work with this or not. We'll see. Alright, so we can say open a photograph from file. Let me take a look here. And let's go ahead and just bring in this case picture from a, no, let's do something different. Well, I'll just use the same one, I guess. Sure, alright. Alright, so it says Crazy Bump is thinking, whatever. It says testers may pretend, because this is a fairly simple program and it's still in beta. Well, it might be alpha, I'm not sure, but alright, so then it asks you which one you want to pick. So for the purposes of experimentation, just choose one. Okay. Alright, and you'll see what you end up with is, well, you can select here, I want normals, or I want displacement maps, or I want a specularity map, or occlusion map, or a diffuse map. Diffuse map is the color information, so that's what we start with. And normals are the height and depth information. You can change your sliders to make it more or less obvious as far as your height map information goes. So you can go ahead and use this program and get a good starting point, if nothing else. Okay. Now you can't really see it, which I'll go ahead and alright, you can see here this little 3D preview, and the 3D preview lets you kind of get a better idea of the depth that this this bump map is going to leave you on this wall, okay, or whatever texture you're using. You can sharpen to make more rigid, more or less. You can turn on or off, or increase or decrease the shape recognition. You can add some fine detail or take some fine detail out, medium detail, etc., etc. The best way to understand this is just by using it and practicing it. That's the only real advice I can give you, is experiment with it, so you can kind of get a good idea of what you're doing as far as all these different settings. Likewise for specularity, where you're going to change the highlights, the shadows that aren't really shadows, and the highlights that aren't really highlights. You can kind of see how the brightness right here kind of changes. See, I can turn my brightness up to make it almost like plastic looking, or I can drop it down to make it very matte, or matte, however you want to pronounce it, depending on which language we're speaking here, more or less. So, you know, the same thing applies. You really need to kind of just mess around with it until you get the hang of what you're actually going to be producing after you bring this into Maya and apply all of these different texture, or these material channels with these different textures, and see what you end up with. Okay. Now, once we start throwing something together, you really won't even be able to see a huge difference until you actually apply some lighting to the scene that's not the Maya default lighting. Alright, so let's switch into Maya and put together a quick wall just so we can kind of see what we're working with here. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and close Crazy Bump. We don't need it. And we'll go into Maya here, and I'm just going to make a box. That's it. Just a simple box for a simple wall, just so we can see where we would actually import this extra information. I'm just checking the channel for a moment, just to okay, so going back to Maya, let's go ahead and throw something together here. Alright, so we'll go ahead and apply a new material here, and we'll start off with a blend. And with this blend material applied, let's go ahead and throw some color information on here in the form of a file. This file is going to be included with the assets for this lab. Let's see, where are you? In the bathroom textures, and let's go ahead and grab for the color information, we're going to grab the diffuse, and that's what D stands for, so the diffuse texture, okay? And we'll go ahead and press 6 so we see shaded display. Alright, so here is our texture. Alright, so go ahead and I'm not sure if I even like 2016. Alright, well, let's just throw one on here anyway. Throw on a planar map to kind of stretch this out a little bit more. Alright, that's good enough. I'm not worried about the inside here. If you were, you know, you have to go in with your UV editor and kind of move some stuff around, but that was a different lab. I want it to be a little bit, there we go. That's what I like, just like that. Okay, so now let's take this and take a look at these. Let's turn off the grid. Alright, so looking at this, we can see the texture doesn't look bad, you know, but it it definitely looks flat. It doesn't look real at all. I mean, even where you see this dirt, I mean, the color information tells you that it's dirt, but it doesn't look like dirt. Alright, so let's add some more information. Alright, so inside of the material, which we'll go ahead and name this wall mat, or actually my naming convention is M for material and underscore and then the name of whatever geometry we're talking about or whatever model we're using. Alright, so we have our color set. Okay, we're using the wall tiles, the fuse. But let's also add something to this bump map and something, where'd you go? To the specular color. Alright, so first let's do the specular. So we'll use a file again, and the file we're going to load in is the wall tiles underscore S. S for specular. And you'll see it's just the highs and the lows as far as the specularity. Okay. Now, again, you don't see a whole lot of difference. And again, that has more to do with the lighting more than anything. So if we could go in and just set it on standard lights, and we'll create a very simple point light. And we'll kind of move this towards the wall. Alright, so let's go back into this material. And we can edit. No, I don't want to edit. Sorry. I want to change this to, well, let's just come back out of here. I'm just going to change it to something else. Alright, and with that little change, you can see that I took this other file that's more like broken glass, and as I move around the scene, you can see that the substance or the layout of that texture has changed the way that light gets reflected back off of this surface. So what it looks like here is that, you know, someone threw some kind of, you know, sticky liquid or something, you know, maybe some kind of like, I don't know, looks like almost like sugar, like dried sugar, really. Okay, so whenever I change it here back to the file it's supposed to be, the wall tile specular, now you can kind of see what's going on here. Okay. Alright, so now the reason I did the specular first is if I did the bump first, it would be actually harder to notice the specular, and the reason is because the change isn't quite so dramatic with the specular. Now, keep in mind what this looks like now, what this texture looks like now. You know, it looks flat, right? So let's go, and in this material we're going to add a bump map. Same thing with a file. We're going to use it as a bump. The file we're going to use is B for bump, wall tiles, B for bump, open. Now immediately there's a huge difference. And so much so that it actually looks pretty hideous. So let's go back here to the bump 2D1 node, and let's change this depth setting. Alright, and you can kind of see what's happening here. We should be able to really see what's happening. So 0.025. And now you can see the depth of the tiles inset with the concrete, or sorry, the cement actually. And it looks like all of these are little extrusions of geometry, but they're not. It's just an illusion. Alright. Now, if we want it to be a little bit more noticeable, you can change your bump depth here. Okay. 0.05 is a little bit too much, a little bit too sharp, so it takes away from some of the realism there. 0.01 is just not quite enough, it's too blurry. So with this one, I find that 0.025 is a good average. Okay. Alright, so with the concept that we're working with in place, we're going to go ahead and set up an entire scene and do some lighting tricks with it. Alright, so let's get rid of this wall and open the scene that is included in the assets called Bathroom Begin. Now, what we have here is a very simple bathroom setting. Okay, so you have to be careful because all of these have the same material applied to them. So if we change one, we change them all. So before we start applying textures here, we're going to apply a new material to each section. So the floor gets a new material, all of the metal pieces will get a material, the ceiling will get a material, the wood frame for the windows, the walls, etc. Okay. The mirror. This is a mirror, and there are metal insets holding it in there. And let's go ahead and start with the metal sections. Now this is going to be very similar to the chrome material that we created in class, but it won't be quite so reflective. Alright, so let's assign a new material. We'll make it a blend material. Our color is going to be black. Our reflectivity will be kind of high, but not completely high. Metal does have some reflective qualities. Our specular color, set it maybe here. If you want to set it up towards white, you can. It's up to you. Okay. So with all of that, let's call it metal. Alright, so now I'll apply the same material to all of these metal pieces. So with these selected, I'll assign an existing material, the metal material. And for the ceramic, I'm going to do something similar. I'll do another new material, and I'll start this off with I'm thinking about throwing in a fong, but it doesn't really, it's not a fong. Alright, so I'll call this ceramic. Alright, so let me check my notes to get this correct. Let's go ahead and take a look at my notes here. Alright, so our color needs to be around white, and our reflectivity is going to be low. Our specular color will be a little bit high, and the specular roll-off needs to be changed as well. Okay, let's do that. So get out of here, email. Our reflected color, we'll leave it at black. Our reflectivity, we'll put it around 150 or so. Our eccentricity, we'll set it down to about 150 as well. We'll set our specular roll-off all the way up to 1. And let's see, oh yeah, our color, we need to set it towards white. Because, ceramic is usually a white color. And that should be about it. I think that will be okay. Okay. Alright, so let's go ahead and start applying some materials, or sorry, some textures. Now we did the metal ones and the ceramic right out of the gate here because they don't have anything else applied. They don't have a texture. And actually we need to do the light bulb as well. Likewise, it doesn't have any textures applied to it in this scene. So we'll assign a new material, we'll make it a blend, we'll call this bulb. Okay. Alright, so depending on the color that you want to kind of fake, more or less. Well, we don't even need it to be a blend material. It's not actually going to be reflecting anything. It's actually should just be a Lambert. And let's see. Yeah, I guess that's fine. Just standard. I am going to change the color to kind of a dull yellow. Okay. Alright, so let's start walking through the rest of the scene and applying some materials. So with the wall, I'm going to right click, assign new material. I'm going to make it a blend. And let's see. I think actually the wall might be a good, because the reflection doesn't kind of spread out so far on the on ceramic wall or tile walls. So this would be a good opportunity to go ahead and use a Fong shader for the first time. And we're going to set the color, because we want some reflection, we're going to set the color towards the black scale. Well, no we're not, because we're not even going to use it, so it doesn't really matter. We are going to change the reflectivity all the way down. We don't want it to really reflect anything at all. It's going to anyway, but just so you know. And we'll go ahead and change our color. And we'll use that diffuse map for the wall. Okay, press 6 so we can see what we're working with. Alright, and with that done, we'll go ahead and apply the same material, which doesn't have a name. Which I'm going to change right now. I'm going to change this name to walls. Same thing here. I'll assign existing material. And on the other side as well. Alright, now with that applied, you can kind of see the mirror coming out a little bit better. Alright. So with the wall, before we move on, let's go ahead and throw our other channel maps on here. Let's throw on our bump channel map. So we'll select File. Make sure we have it set for a bump. And our image will be the bump wall tiles. Okay. And just like before, we need to roll this back significantly. 0.025 works for me. Alright. And let's go ahead and for the same material, let's change our specular color to be with the wall tiles specular map provided. Okay. Alright, so with that in place, let's go ahead and do the floor next. I'll apply a new material and I'll start it out being a Lambert. Our color information is going to come from a file. We'll use floor diffuse map. Okay. And we'll go and throw the bump map on as well. And as you can imagine, we are going to have to change. Alright, so with the floor it's kind of interesting because with the wall, yeah, we got a little bit of differentiation between the raised surface and the depressed surface. And you can kind of see a little bit of this damage information. But with the floor, you don't really see so much with the depressed regions versus the raised regions. But the damaged sections, or the wear and tear of years of use, can come out really well. So this is a good technique to add just a little bit of damage or something to a texture to give it that look that it has some age to it. To make it look dusty, we'll get to at a later date, but just for an obvious look that this floor is not brand new. Okay, so we'll change the depth. I don't want to say 0.01. That's too small. 0.015. Likewise, too small. 0.02. One zero too many there. Let's try 0.15. 0.1. I think 0.15 looks pretty good. Now these settings are to taste. If you like a different setting, use a different setting. I'm going to rename this material to floor. Alright, so we kind of have our floor texture there. But we still need to, I think, we didn't do specular, I think. Oh well, we don't have to because it's Lambert. So yeah, I guess we need to go ahead and change it. Yeah, we'll change it to a blend just so we can throw a specular on there. Okay, the file that we're going to use, which with the floor, it's really optional if you want to throw a specular on there. I'm going to rename this now, material floor, and I'll change my reflectivity down. I don't want the floor to be reflecting a lot of light. I think I'm going to take my bump down as well. I want to have a little bit less defined as well. Alright, so we have our specular added to the floor and to the walls. Let's go ahead and do the mirror next. Add a new material. We'll use a blend. Let me make sure I did not use a foam material. One second. Now I used a blend, but again, we've used blend materials enough, so let's go ahead and, you know, if we have an area where we can just throw in a little bit of something new, let's do it. So let's change this to a foam material. Alright. And for our color channel, let's go to our file, and we'll use the mirror, diffuse. Alright, so you have a nice shattered look here. And we'll come back out of this, and we'll call this material mirror. And for our bump map, likewise, go grab this file. And obviously right away, you can see how much detail is possible with this bump map. Alright. You also see obviously that it's way too much, so we need to back this off. But when you bring it down, this is a really good texture to kind of see see what's possible, more or less. Right, that's too much. Not enough. Maybe I'll take it negative. Yeah, no. Alright, that looks... There we go. That's a good value. I like that. Alright, we're not going to mess with the lighting as far as that goes. Alright, the last piece, well, the last pieces are the ceiling. So we'll go ahead and change that up. So we'll assign a new material. We're going to use a Lambert to start anyway. File, and we'll do the ceiling diffuse for the color information. And we're going to grab this bump map. let's change that amount. With the ceiling, it doesn't need to be very profound at all. Just enough to kind of see that there is some 3D effect emulated up there. Okay. Also, these pieces on the floor, the trim, is what it's called, and the window frame are all the same material. So we'll assign a new material, we'll make it a blend, and we'll call it wood. Well, it's not really reflective. Yeah, you know, if it's varnished, I guess it could be pretty reflective. So we'll stick with that. For the color, we'll go in here with this file. We'll change to wood grain. Alright, and come back out of it here, and we'll change the reflective color to not be quite so black, but we'll change the reflectivity down a lot. And we'll kind of make the specular color a little bit blacker. Specular roll off we'll set back to the default. Alright, so alright, so now with all of this done, you won't see the biggest effects with this, like I said previously, until you disable the scene lighting, turn on shadows, and then bring in some actual lighting. Okay, and we'll bring this in the scene. Whoa, I don't know what that is, but it's not my light. And kind of bring this in and move it around, and you can start to really see the effect here. Now, the shadows, you don't quite see quite as... Sorry, my son is wanting some of my time, so we'll do a couple renders with this, and so you can kind of see how it comes inside here. Alright, so first we'll take this light and we'll throw it over here and kind of put it inside the light bulb, more or less. And let's turn up the intensity. Now, I said before that if these emit diffuse and emit specular, and then again this was in a previous lab, that you wouldn't really be able to see any difference until we threw some textures and some specular maps on these. And now is a good opportunity to illustrate what these do. So if I turn off emit diffuse, we only get the specular. Alright? If I have the diffuse on and I turn off the specular, you'll see that the highlights disappears. So that extra light information from the specular maps fades away. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's throw a special effect on the light. Let's do a quick render just to see what we got. I'm going to switch to mental ray and we'll do a quick render. I want to see what that glow looks like. Yeah, that's not what I had in mind. Oh, there we go. Still, I'd like to have a little bit more of a lighting effect there. So let's go ahead and turn up the glow intensity. And the light itself, I thought it was a point light. Okay then. Let's bring the light out front. I can bring it inside and take the material and make it transparent. But even with that, yeah, maybe something like that. And show our lights. So all. And let's turn up that intensity just a bit. Let's tame the color. A bit of a yellow. Turn on linear decay and see if, nah, that's not going to work. No, I don't think so. I can use a volume light. Still too bright. Oh, that's not terrible. Depends on the kind of look you're going for here. Let's just do a test render. See what that glow looks like now with the light inside of the bulb. Well, that didn't turn out very well at all, did it? Well, let's change it back to the point light then. Change our intensity a bit. And do another test render. Alright, so the light still needs work, but we can start to see kind of what we're working with here. We have some shadows here, the shadow underneath the soap dish, the reflection of the mirror, or the pieces that are left, is kind of shining through. It looks like these metal pieces, I might want to change that reflectivity a little bit. Maybe add a higher specular level to kind of make it shine a bit more. Alright, so let's back it off and take a look at what we have with the tub as far as Alright, so let's move that light just a little bit inside. Throw up one last test render. I want to see how much reflectivity the tub has, the ceramic has. Yeah, that point light really needs tamed down. And the glow effect on the light itself, turn that down too. Alright, I know I already said one last render, but I'm going to do one last render. And then we're going to go ahead and end this lab. For me. Not for you. For those in my class. Turned it down too much. Well, we did get what I wanted here. So a nice reflection here. We can see the reflection on the mirror. We see some specular highlights on the metal of the faucet and the handles. So, you know, take a little bit of working with the light to kind of get it down to what you would want. I would go ahead and go into my software, Maya software, and do some renders there until I got the light looking the way I wanted. Mental Ray obviously takes more time than a simple software or a simple hardware render would actually take. Well, usually, I don't know what's going on here, but software is actually taking longer than the Mental Ray. Well, maybe that's just the way it is on a Mac. I don't know. I'm not a big Mac guy. And actually the software render doesn't look terrible. The Mental Ray looks a lot better, but this doesn't look terrible as far as just a quick overview, a quick render. Okay. Now, keep in mind that this glow effect is also completely optional. I kind of like that little glow to it. I like a lens flare a lot better, though. When we get into some more visual effects, particle systems and stuff like that, we'll take a look at lens flares as well. Just to give you an idea of what it will look like if you turn off that glow intensity special effect on your Lambert material. So this is what I want. I want, for the lab, I want you to recreate this scene. Just follow along and make this scene. You can change the materials however you would like. but make some kind of really interesting render. It will not be this one. And having the light inside of the bulb, you don't really need to do that either. You can set the light outside if you prefer, but it gives more of a sense of realism if it's inside. Another way to work around this is turn your transparency up a lot higher. But anyway, like I was saying, move around the scene, change some materials, bring in some external models if you want to. Maybe a female or a male model, bring them in with some more textures, add some realism to the scene, and see if you can come up with a really nice render, a really realistic looking render, something, even on the outside of the windows you could bring in your well, in 2016 it's here. Bring in your image-based lighting and maybe outside the window, give some kind of nighttime effect or whatever. But produce a pretty good render to prove that you walked all the way through this lab. Now, if you're having trouble finding where your renders are being stored, you go over to File and you set your project, and you set the location of your project. So I'll say my desktop, and make a new folder. I'll call it bathroom stuff, and I'll select that. I'll set it. All right, create a default workspace. Then I'll do a render again. And what you'll find is now that I've actually set this project location, you get these folders. One of the folders is images, and inside of this images folder is where your renders are going to actually be stored. Alright, so I can go ahead and open this render up. Alright, so here's my render. Alright. Now that almost looks real. And you'll notice that even if you take a look at your render inside of Maya, it's not always going to look like what it really looks like. Okay. Alright, so that's it for this lab. I hope you learned some things. I don't know. Oh, actually, wait a minute. Yeah, you didn't see that render. Okay, here. I forgot. Let me go ahead and oh, none of the renders have been showing up. Okay, well, sorry for that confusion. I'm trying this new software, but here's what my render looked like in my render view. But whenever you check that folder, this is what my render actually exported as. All right, so don't completely trust your render view even after you do your render, because it doesn't really illustrate what will actually be rendered whenever you output it. I'll work out the eccentrics of this program as we go along. But alright, so that's all for this lab, and I'll see you in class in a couple days. If you just stumbled here by some reason, I hope you learned something as well. Have a nice night. Bye-bye.